The concept of Dharma gets to be thematized in a set of texts, somewhere composed from between the 3rd century BC and the start of the Common Era. And they're called the collection of texts, the Dharma Sutras. But the idea that they are drawing on goes back perhaps 1,000 years before that to a related notion called Ridha, which is found in the Vedas themselves. Ridha refers to the idea of order, the order of maximal power that explains everything about who human beings are and how we function. This concept of Ridha that is reused and evolves over the centuries into the concept of Dharma looks at two interconnected ideas of order. So one is what we might call the natural order. That is to say that there is a world in which the sun rises and sets and the moon and the stars move according to a preset, a preordered pattern, that tigers are what they are in their behavior, and the trees stand and leave and fruit at particular times, and so forth. The rivers flow and the mountains stand. But the orderliness of the world for the composers of these texts gets its most important role in the orderliness of the behavior, the nature, and the conduct of human beings. So what the authors of these Dharma texts in effect do is to provide a view of human beings as naturally ordered in their social relationality, as if it were intrinsic and an extension of the natural order. Now, this is a view that helps those who have hegemonic narrative power over the society whose conduct they wish to regulate. Because, of course, in the essentially conservative view of life that the Dharma texts offer, people doing what they are naturally born to do, whose duties are given in the social matrix in which they are born, upholds a particular notion of regularity, and of course encodes within it the rules of who does what. But even within these Dharma texts itself, there are nagging voices of questioning. Where do we find out exactly whose duties are what? How do we conduct ourselves appropriately? Who are the sources of authority? Because the Dharma texts themselves begin to confront the problem that human beings do not self-evidently know their role in the preservation of order. It is not as if a tiger chooses whether it can be vegetarian or not, but human beings are constantly making those kinds of decisions. So these Dharma Sutra authors, while seeking to give an idealized view of how people should behave according to the social class into which they are born, the duties and occupations to which they inherit, while acknowledging that need for social order, do leave within it gaps about how Dharma is in fact modeled by the conduct of noble souls, or taught by different people. In fact, one of the texts, the Apastamba Dharma Sutra, ends by saying all that is not contained about Dharma in this book, as it has been given by Brahmin male authors, says all the rest of life should be conducted according to the wisdom of women and of people from different sections of society. That kind of concession is a giveaway that even while developing this very elaborate code of conduct and interpreting Dharma to mean the duties to which one is born, the performance of which preserves a particular social order, these authors were recognizing that human beings constantly question this. The tension, therefore, between being told that there is a natural order and recognizing that human beings, in fact, constantly question it, is nowhere more eloquently and sustainedly and at great length explored than in the epic composition, the Mahabharata. And then within it, the text that comes to be most celebrated, the Bhagavad Gita, itself exemplifies the issues. What do we know about the Bhagavad Gita? The battle lines have been drawn. On two sides are cousins with, they seem, equal but contesting claims to the throne. On the one side is the warrior Arjuna looking across the battlefield. His opponents not only are the cousins with whom he wishes to fight, but also elders who, through a variety of complicated ways, have reluctantly chosen to fight against his side. He cannot bring himself to contemplate the consequences of entering into this battle. He knows very well it is going to be terrible, it's going to wreak havoc, it is going to kill family and friends on both sides. So he confronts this and comes to a diagnosis about what he should do in these circumstances, which is to throw down his bow and refuse to fight. So already we begin to see that the Gita is an articulation of the intractability of the question of what Dharma is. Now, it happens that his chariot has been driven by a cousin of both sides, Krishna. And Krishna, the charioteer, asks him to pick up the bow and fight. And he invokes Dharma. He says, you have duties. You have the duty to your elder brother, who is the rightful claimant of the throne. You have a duty to your wife, who has been humiliated by your opponents. You have a duty to all those who trust you to be a great warrior and a leader and have aligned themselves with you. You have a duty to this entire land, because only through the victory of your side will social order and justice be established. But none of these claims to Dharma makes enough sense to Arjuna. So Krishna then has to resort to an escalating set of considerations to bring Arjuna back to being a warrior. He says, your intrinsic dharma, your swadharma, what is innate to you, is to be this warrior. But already we see this problem. If it is innate to Arjuna to be the warrior, why is he not fighting? As soon as the question of the moral choice enters the picture, we have a recognition that Dharma is not the natural order that the hegemonic narrative would like us to believe. So Krishna then has to teach Arjuna a set of insights which he hopes will bring Arjuna to pick up his bow again. Now, we're not looking at that series of arguments. He tries to say you have a fundamental true self, which is not in any case going to be killed or be killed. There is actually a particular kind of drama happening in this world which leaves the metaphysical truths of the self untouched. It is necessary for you to act in a particular way without thought of the consequences of your action, and that is the true duty, which misses the point because Arjuna is not wanting to fight for selfish reasons. He's simply asking about the greater cost of what it will be to fight. And then, of course, famously, Krishna pulls out his culminating argument. He reveals himself to be God. He says, all of this is fated. All of this is destined. He gives his cosmic vision, assuring Arjuna that, in fact, this battle is already fated, and in the end, all of this is part of God's own plan. And furthermore, he assures Arjuna, quite against the spirit of what he had said before about taking up his duties, his dharma, he says, now that I have revealed myself, forsake your commitment to the ideas of duties that you might have had. Simply act, offering up the consequences of your dutiful actions to me. It is in me that you find your redemption, which is, of course, an answer, and a deeply powerful one, and one that is echoed down the ages to this very day. But what it does suggest is that the central knot of dharma between what is given to us as our duty and our questioning of what is given to us cannot be unknotted. It must, in fact, be cut by the sword of faith. It is only by taking recourse in the guarantee of God, of something that lies beyond our comprehension of order and duty, are we going to find the capacity to move forward with this conundrum. And quite naturally, through the history of the tradition, and even more so in our times, people have found that inadequate as a moral and philosophical response. And one of the characteristic features of modern study of the Gita, in exemplary form, for example, of Mahatma Gandhi, is to step back very sharply from the one side of Dharma, the one rope of the knot of Dharma, which is it's the self-evident nature of our intrinsic duties, our values, our commitments, how we should act. Because what Gandhi confronts with the question of Dharma is to say, well, if it is absolutely our intrinsic nature, then our questioning our duties is the most intrinsic thing of all. We are given a consciousness, a conscience. It is our very capacity to ask what our duty is that is our supreme duty. So decisively, amongst these modern commentators, especially Gandhi, the idea is that, in fact, we must rework what the problem of dharma is. It is not about the order and the duty that we feel ourselves born into, that we feel ourselves to have to take up, but rather it is the constant questioning of it. And the Mahabharata gives us an indication that it accepts that the riddle of dharma will never be answered, because at critical times through the text, when characters are confronted by this clash, by the dilemmas between whether they should act according to what is given to them as what they should act, and whether they should act according to where their own feelings, their own thoughts, in short, their own conscience leads them to, the text stands back and says, Dharma is a puzzle. Dharma is a mystery. It cannot be resolved. And it is that deliberate narrative of irresolution that we must keep in our mind when we look at what is most philosophically interesting about Dharma. It is that we will never not be confronted by values, duties, the burden of how we must act, as Arjuna was made to. But we must be able to feel that questioning it and going our own way is itself intrinsic to the confrontation of the dilemmas of Dharma.